All right, we're getting started today. Welcome to the ninth episode of the Modern Merchant Podcast. Today's going to be a fun one. We are going to be talking about in-house fulfillment versus third-party logistics fulfillment. We've got a special guest on with us today. It is Aaron Rubin. He is the CEO of ShipHero. Thanks for jumping on, Aaron. Appreciate your time.
Thanks for having me. And exciting and third-party logistics. I've never heard those put together in the same sentence, but we'll do our best.
I know. Sorry. We're gonna stick with 3PL. But we've got Travis on today as well. Usual suspect. We decided to switch out Matt for Aaron. But we really wanted to talk about a lot of cool stuff in regards to fulfillment. Right, so there's a lot of people selling through their own in-house fulfillment using 3PLs. Obviously, we talked about dropship fulfillment in the last episode. But before we get started, Aaron, why don't you give us a quick background about yourself and ShipHero?
Yeah, Aaron Rubin, CEO of ShipHero. ShipHero has two divisions. One is a warehouse management software for e-commerce, so brands that ship from their own warehouses. Typically 10 to 500 million in annual revenue, sort of our customer base there. And then we also provide outsourced fulfillment services under ShipHero Fulfillment, which is basically using the same software, but we're shipping it out of our buildings. That's who we are.
Got it. Perfect.
And Aaron's here after a long, quick flight, right? With the daughter yesterday.
Yep, I did a day trip to see a customer in one of our warehouses in Dallas and back from New York. So it was a long day, hot day yesterday.
Nice. Appreciate you being here.
Thanks.
Yeah, we appreciate you being here. So we're gonna start off the segment real quick. We want to kind of give a breakdown on what's been happening in e-commerce and retail. I grabbed some stuff that was that caught my eye in regards to what's been going on this past week. Something that a lot of people have seen, stamps.com agrees to a $6.6 billion buyout. That was really recent. This was something that I saw you mention and talk about as well, Aaron, because it's in our space, is the ShipBob raising $200 million in funding. That was a big thing that happened recently. One thing that stuck out to me, you don't really hear about a lot of this going on, but Eddie Beier, one of the apparel retailers, they just recently launched a rental gear program with Arrive Outdoors and doing more in the outdoor space. So it's kind of cool to see them going into a D2C model. A lot of brands are kind of going that way. A really interesting one, Sam's Club is launching a new app called Scan and Ship for like their bulky items. You can scan it with your phone and purchase it, and then they ship it from one of their locations to you instead of you having to worry about like getting it in a cart and then getting it to your car. So that was a cool little feature that it looks like they're coming out with. And then a really big one in our space was BigCommerce is integrated to Amazon's multi-channel fulfillment. And I guess has like a more in-house application and integration with Amazon. So that was another big feat that BigCommerce came out with this week. What stands out to you, Travis? Anything else happened I'm missing?
Well, I think we missed, and might as well start at the top. ShipHero raising $50 million. So I think we might as well start with that since we're talking about the other raises and all that in the space. It was something that I was talking earlier before the show started with Aaron. We've gone through the process. We raised a very small kind of friends and family round that mostly kind of been, self-funded to some extent. But always we went through the process, at least talking with investors. So I'm always really curious to get thoughts from other entrepreneurs and companies out there. Aaron, I saw a podcast with you, man, probably 3 years ago or something like that, where you talked about, we're not raising right now because I don't have the formula to tell an investor, right? You put X amount of dollars in here and then you get X amount of dollars out. You must have figured that out in the last year. Can you talk about, what was that change in mindset, or what kind of was clicked that you're like, this is a time to kind of go raise?
Yeah, I don't think we have figured that quite out yet, but so because we were bootstrapped we raised $435,000 from friends and family, and that's all we had raised, and we were through 30 million in annual revenue when we did the raise. So I don't think we didn't quite have a super slick story or really that exact formula of like what we're going to do with money we raised, but we had a lot of inbound interest, and some of them are some top tier firms and good offers. So we decided to go ahead with it.
Gotcha. And then, using the money, looking forward, is it going to be split between the two kind of, like you said, departments or business units, I guess you will? Like, where are you kind of focusing that?
Yeah. So we'll spend on both. We already have, before the money, we already have 55 engineers. So we had a pretty robust team. So we didn't need the money to sort of develop the core product. But now that we have some more money, we'll push a bit faster. And then we're also acquiring some warehouses. So that'll be more than half of the money will go in that bucket.
Very cool.
So go ahead.
Some shade on the BigCommerce Amazon announcement.
Let's do it.
I don't remember what year it was. It was at Unite where Shopify announced the Shopify Fulfillment Network, which uses our software in the background. So I don't remember what year that was, but I think it was at least 3 years ago now. BigCommerce had something with Amazon, so I guess it took them 3 years, but they're trying to catch up. So
yeah, what was it? I saw it's like someone took a take of like Shopify is funding the rebels, and Amazon is partnering with the giant or something like that.
BigCommerce is.
BigCommerce is partnering with the giant, like obviously being Amazon. So it's a funny, different take, from both sides of the spectrum there. But then also in general, like, I don't know. I don't see a lot multi-channel fulfillment. I guess it might be a strategy in the future from Amazon. I don't know. We don't see a lot of people leveraging it. It's I'll be curious to see how that plays out and if that's a big part of the strategy. But if you have your items in Amazon, I feel like 95% of the time you're just selling it on Amazon. So I'm curious how much people are actually leveraging that or going to be.
Yeah, we see people that are like 80% Amazon and then 20% everything else. And then they just say, I'll just ship the other 20% through Amazon, which makes perfect sense. It's just like, that's my core business. But I don't know anyone who's 20% Amazon, 80% BigCommerce who's actually going to rely on Amazon for the logistics. So, and Amazon's made it super clear who their customer is, right? The customer is you and I buying stuff on Amazon.com, not you and I selling stuff on Amazon.com. So, you choose who you want to work with, and I think most internet sellers are savvy enough to know that this is who Amazon cares about, and you probably don't want to rely on them for your outsourced logistics for your non-Amazon sales. For your Amazon sales, it's great, but for your non-Amazon sales, it gets sort of bumped to the back of the line. I know they said they're, I guess we'll improve it as part of this program, but I think let's see it.
Right.
Yeah, it's always let's see it. No, that's some great insight on that, and I definitely wanted to dive into this type of fulfillment, right? Different multi-channel fulfillment. We're talking about different types of fulfillment, and the topic today about talking about in-house and third-party logistics. I know ShipHero, you guys have solutions and services for both, customers doing those different types of fulfillment. Obviously, in-house fulfillment, I'm getting an order in and I'm sending it out from my in-house warehouse, whether I'm working right there, it's next to me, or I've got my team at my warehouse and they're fulfilling those orders. Pretty standard, traditional retail, right? And then 3PL is outsourcing the logistics side. Travis, correct me if I'm wrong, it's like buying space, right? We're buying different sections and space of the warehouse of the 3PL, and they're doing the logistics for me for whenever, orders are coming in and I need to fulfill that to my customers. Aaron, what's a quick definition that you say or you talk about when it comes to 3PLs and in-house fulfillment? And I saw, Travis, you put something down here that you wanted to talk about 3PL versus 4PL, which is a really interesting topic. I think you guys wrote something on this too, of what was it, like 2PL versus 3PL versus 4PL versus 5PL, I guess, per se. So, what's your take on the definitions on the differences between those two fulfillments?
Yeah, well, I'll jump in first on the in-house versus outsourced. So I think outsourced is sort of the traditional mail order way. And then with the internet and people selling really small quantities, they couldn't get a good 3PL. So they ended up doing it in-house and just doing it that way. And I think the world's been going more now back towards the outsource model. So I think the reason why a lot of e-commerce companies did it in-house, and I had an e-commerce company for 15 years, and we did it in-house until we outsourced to a company that went bankrupt and almost took us with them. So it was about as bad an experience as you could have. But I think these days there's a lot of good options. So while 5 years ago, I probably would have, if my best friend asked me, should I outsource or do it in-house? I probably would have said in-house. These days, I'd lean more towards outsource because there are quality providers who are stable, who you can rely on, who will actually, work with you if you're even a $2 million brand, where in the past, if you weren't doing, 20 or 100 million, you couldn't really find a quality provider. So anyway, we can talk about that more if you want, but that's sort of my quick overview of sort of like in-house versus outsourced.
Well, yeah, just to like double click into that, like someone that goes from in-house to outsource, like they've already been doing in-house, what's kind of that breaking point? Is there a certain amount of order themes can you look at it makes sense to move to an outsourced operation? But what do you see the common themes when they make that change?
Yeah, so a lot of times people get to that point when it's when they need to sign a lease on a larger space and they're not sure if they want to. So example, customer of ours is Adams. They make shoes. I heard their brand. So they have a warehouse that uses our software in Brooklyn, but they were scaling up a lot, and if you want to get more space, you typically have to go and sign a multi-year lease on more space, and that's if you're not sure if the demand is going to be there to support that space, or if you think, hey, I might actually grow out of this space, you lose a 5-year leases are not very flexible. So they did a hybrid approach where they kept their warehouse that they had, but they didn't get a larger warehouse. They just outsourced some of the stuff to some of our warehouses. So, but it's a typical breaking point is I don't want to sign a lease on a larger space. That's one. Two is personnel issues. So people just get sick of people keep calling out sick. I keep spending my days filling in for them, packing orders. I'm behind on my marketing plan. I'm behind on my product development plan because I just spent 12 hours packing orders to cover for the 2 people that missed today. And they're like, I want to get rid of this. I just don't want to do it anymore, right? Yeah. The other personnel issue that often happens is there's one warehouse manager who they basically reliant on. And then if that person leaves, they also look at okay, this isn't good. I can't be, stuck with one person who's mission critical. So they outsource. Yeah.
It's they're either a brand or, I would think mostly brands, maybe some retailers in there as well that's their core business is pushing product or creating product, right? And you might as well outsource where you can, where it's not a core competency. That makes a lot of sense. The hybrid thing you brought up was interesting. I'm sure it's a good way to kind of hedge or you dip your toe into it. Do you see people using outsource for a strategic location, like a West Coast, and they keep theirs on the East Coast? Is that common?
Yep. Yeah. So we see a decent amount of that. A lot of people that do that tend to just move to fully outsource. They realize that why am I even bothering? I could just do a fully outsource. We have a lot of customers that are doing that across countries. So let's say we've got a customer that sells beach towels and they'll ship in Australia using software. Then they'll outsource their US fulfillment because they live in Australia, right? So that's where they started, but they have a huge base in the US and they want to open another warehouse. So hybrid cross country happens a lot. Sometimes, across different borders. Sometimes within the US where it's East Coast versus West Coast, but that's less common.
Yeah. And you guys, I know you had a partner network there for a little bit, but now with your own warehouses, you're only on the East Coast, or do you have how many warehouses do you guys run?
So we started with partners and we still work with some partners, but our own, we have 4. We've got Pennsylvania, Texas, I was there yesterday, Nevada, where we're just moving from one facility to a much larger facility, and then Northern Florida. So we've got 4 and we'll probably add a 5th this year.
Gotcha. Cool. All right. Yeah. So Austin, not going to take you off track too much early, but we can get back to whatever.
Well, you said Northern Florida, so I'm wondering how close we are to that. Since we're based here in
where are you guys?
Jacksonville.
Oh, you are Jacksonville? I was just there. I'll be back again soon. Yeah. So we've got a decent amount of real estate down there.
Yeah, we're a good spot for that. I mean, Amazon's got a fulfillment spot here, and still relatively cheap land, I guess, and that's. Yeah, might as well keep going off track. I got another question. We got you, so might as well. How do you just picking my own interest here? How do you kind of analyze where is it land costs? You probably have a lot of data. I'd love to know how you picked Jacksonville and the spot in Texas and all of that.
it's really where the customers are. The main costs are shipping. So you want to reduce the money you're giving UPS and FedEx. So the land costs, sure, it matters. You'd rather be cheaper, but it's not going to really move the needle. Same thing on labor costs. Labor availability is an issue. So that is one concern where like you do have to have enough people. You got to make sure you have a minimum level of talent that you can pull from. But it's basically just about getting it close to your customers and then avoiding states that you don't necessarily want to be in, like California. So like we're intentionally, even though we have a large customer base in Southern California, we keep our warehouse in Nevada and Las Vegas because it gets there in one day anyways, and you avoid a lot of tax and regulatory issues by getting out of California. Same thing, we're in Pennsylvania, we're right on the border of New Jersey, it's like 10 miles, but we're on the Pennsylvania side, and if you look, you go on one side of the border, there's barely any warehouses. You go on the other, it's all warehouses, right? Because Pennsylvania is just a more friendly business environment. So there's a little of that, but it's about being close to the customer.
Makes sense.
So when it comes to, I want to actually ask this question too. When it comes to 3PLs, because I don't know if Travis gets this a lot. I've actually gotten this a lot in the past with customers that we worked with or leads that we're talking to. And people never know where to start when it comes to the outsourcing, right? They never know where to start, who to talk to, where to research off of. Like, one, they need to do what you said, right? They need to evaluate, like, is outsourcing the right way to go about it for my business. But then once they decide I want to do a 3PL, like I want to use a 3PL, Aaron, what do you think are some like initial questions people should be asking themselves, or where should they be starting whenever they first like decide, all right, I'm going to start outsourcing my fulfillment? Like, where should I start? What would be your tips?
Yeah, so I think it's definitely a problem in the industry where there's not a lot of brand names. There's no McDonald's of 3PL, right? So no one really knows, oh, McDonald's going to be this, Shake Shack's going to be that. Like, it's like all these companies I never heard of, right? So how do I know who's got the burger I like? So it's definitely a problem. A lot of people rely on word of mouth. So, whether it's forums or real life word of mouth about like, hey, this is who I use, and was it good or bad? Review sites are another good ones. You just got to be careful which ones they are. So like, for example, if you go on the Shopify App Store, those reviews are not pay to play. They're legit, right? You can't fake it. There's other sites that are much more pay to play.
Yeah.
And a good way to know if one is pay to play is you can look at, actually, Shopify I'm using them again, but they're actually a really good example where you can go on some sites and like review Shopify and look at Shopify reviews versus, and I'm way off topic, but whatever. Like Shopify reviews and like, I don't know, pick some other not good software, OpenCart or whatever, right? And you'll see that like OpenCart, 5 stars, Shopify, like 3 stars. You're like, we all know Shopify is a way better product than OpenCart. Like, why is that, right? Because it's a pay to play site. So anyone can get 5 stars if you just willing to write a big enough check, right? So, so you got to know where you have legit data sources, people that are not pay to play. So Shopify App Store is a really good one. And yeah, look at that. That's where you start. And then the questions you ask are, I'll tell you the question that everyone asks is the wrong question. Everyone asks, how much are you going to charge to pick and pack my order, right?
Yeah.
And what people fail to realize is when you're a brand, you're going to spend 75% of your money with like UPS or FedEx and 25% on the pick and pack. But the people doing the pick and pack have their own UPS accounts. The rates on those vary widely. Everyone will tell you they have the best rates. Varies widely. But on top of that, UPS and FedEx will give kickbacks to the 3PLs of varying sizes. So you can basically go to UPS and say, here's what I want you to charge me, but give me 5% back, and they'll do it. So then they go to you as a merchant and say, I'm going to charge $1 to pick and pack your order, cheapest ever, right? But then they tell UPS, hey, put another $1 on each order and kick it back to me. So the merchant is paying $2, but they're like, this is better than the guy who's going to charge me $1.50, right? So what I always tell people is you have to look at your all-in cost. How much is it going to cost to get it to the customer? Don't worry about how that's divided up. You just care, is it going to cost me $5 to get it to my customers? It's going to cost me $5.50. Pick the one there. I mean, obviously price isn't the only thing that matters, but you need to have visibility to the price. And what a lot of people say is, well, I can't really get that information. It's hard to know, blah, blah, blah. And it's like, well, anyone who's not being forthcoming with that sort of information, there's a reason, right? It's because you're not going to like it when you see how the sausage is made, right? So go with someone who will give you transparent pricing, who will tell you exactly what it's going to cost. And if they can tell you what it costs, like run the other way, because they're not hiding data to make to help you out, right? They're hiding it to help themselves out. So the number one things to look at are, what's the quality and what am I actually paying? And like everything else doesn't really matter compared to those two things.
That's a really good point. Travis, you got any thoughts on that?
Yeah, no, I mean, transparency is gaining a lot of, man. The first one to pull back the kimono is usually can run away with it, right? So it sounds like you guys actually are transparent with the pricing kind of upfront. Is that like a competitive differentiator for you guys?
We put the pricing out there. I mean, other people do. So, there's plenty of other, I'm not saying we're the only option, there's plenty of other options. I'm just saying, ask them for it, right? And not everyone wants to put it on the website, that's fine. But if you email them and say, what's my pricing? And they give you this complicated formula rather than a number, like that's bad.
Yeah.
And I feel like a lot of people are like upfront with telling you like our price, because I feel like that's the shift now, is like they need to tell, like they need to win your business, like they need to tell you exactly who it is. And it's the same thing with us, right? When we're talking to people, like we're more than happy to be like, here's our plans. I mean, we have them on our front website compared to actually a lot of people don't. So that's some really good thoughts. I honestly haven't even thought about that. And let's segue into, honestly, probably the most like the one question that I wanted to ask that I feel like both of us all have like really good domain knowledge on, is how important software comes into play when it comes to not just in-house fulfillment, but 3PLs as well. I know you guys handle both, right? You guys have done like the partner network of 3PLs, and now you guys are kind of doing your own 3PLs, but you guys also help out from like an in-house perspective as well. What's something that jumps off the page to you initially in regards to like how important like good software is when it comes to these two types of fulfillments? To you, Aaron.
Yeah. So we power more outsourced fulfillment than we do in-house. So yeah, we do a lot of that. So yeah, to throw some more shade at random companies, I was talking to someone who was at Saddle Creek Logistics, and they're working on moving out of there. But the software, I can't remember which one they. It might have been SnapFulfill. I don't remember. But anyways, doesn't have a direct connection to Shopify. So they port everything through middle layer. But the middle layer doesn't have product photos. So when the product comes in, they can't match it based on that. So he creates like an Airtable of every new product, and you can already see where this is going, right?
Yeah.
Don't do that. So, there's that. And then there's speed and accuracy with there's speed, accuracy, capability. So speed and accuracy of inventory, right? So like real-time inventory syncing is super important. So you don't oversell, you don't undersell. Complexity is to be able to handle use cases like, I want my 3PL to ship these products, but not these, but maybe it's all going to flow through, right? So like, how can they do that? So you got to build some complexity. Or maybe it's like, these products, I want to go this method. These products, I want to go this method. If it's some combination, I want to do X or Y or Z, or I want to use a different packaging. If it's, for example, common one is, if there's one of this item, you don't need to put it in a box because it's in a box, slap a label. If it's two, then you need to take a box to put both of them in there, right? And combine it so it's not two shipments. So you just need software that can understand those rules and spit that out, right? So depending on what your needs are, just make sure they have the software to do it. Don't assume they do, because some do and some don't.
Yeah.
And the last one, just would be on the ability to handle the volume, right? So depending on what you're doing, like our biggest single day, single store was like 150 something thousand orders in 24 hours, right? If you're doing that volume, make sure you've got software that's not going to choke.
Yeah.
Right? Because in your busiest day, you don't want software that's going to choke.
Yeah. Yeah. So there's a lot of, I think you pulled out a lot of good stuff around what we can ask up front and what we can kind of, looking at different 3PLs, 4PLs. Right? I kind of want to dive into that, right? The 3PLs, 4PLs, there's been a lot written about it out there, but just the value that someone's got a warehouse, someone calls them 3PL, goes to a 4PL because all the value that they add. Can you help us define the different 3PL versus 4PL and like how to look at, the value that might be layered on top of one customer or one company to the next company, right? Is it defining what box to use, like helping that customer through that process? Like what's the value that you're adding on top and how does that relate to a 3PL versus 4PL, or is that something completely different?
Yeah, so just definitionally, 3PL is third-party logistics, so that's your typical, I'm working with a warehouse. 4PL means I'm working with a company, but it doesn't actually own the warehouse. It's someone else's warehouse. So it's a common model. So Shopify Fulfillment Network, it's not Shopify-owned warehouses. They're outsourced warehouses, right? There's nothing wrong with that. It's another party in the relationship. If all the parties are really good, then you end up with a great experience. If the parties are lowest bidder, you might not get the best outcome, right? So you want to make sure that there's a reason behind them using other people's warehouses versus what you don't want to do, and what some of the models out there are, is a 4PL whose model is, I'm going to take your volume and then I'm going to spread it out to the lowest bidder. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to get a bunch of companies in an area, and then I'm going to give them some volume, and then as someone else comes in cheaper, I'll either shift the volume or force everyone, cram down a price decrease. So, and the way they're making money is the 3PL, let's say, would typically charge $1 for the service. They're going to charge you $1 for the service, but they're going to cram down the price on the 3PL in the warehouse to 80 cents.
Yeah.
Right. So in that case, you're not really benefiting from the 4PL. And you're going to end up at, you never want to be with the company that bid the least, right? Mm-hmm. So there's different 4PL models. It's not a bad word, 4PL. It's not necessarily a bad thing, but it's something you just need to be aware of why they're doing it. And we started, like you said, with the 4PL model, and we still have a couple, but we went to the 3PL model where we own our own, because quality was good, but it wasn't to the level we wanted, and in-house gives you a little bit more control.
Right. Vertically integrating. I mean, like you see it with Tesla buying their own batteries, like tons of companies out there where they just want more control. Amazon buying their own logistics and freight, right? And last mile delivery. So makes complete sense. So 4PL, they're just adding that another party and another link in the chain there. Makes sense. So when you're looking at 3PLs or even 4PLs, even probably more so 4PLs, like what kind of value on top of the pick, pack, and ship, right? Everyone can pick, pack, and ship. There's some value in the cheapest rates. Everyone says they got it, like you said. But is there any other value-added services these guys should be looking, whether they're brands or retailers, they should be asking about? Like, hey, you can do everything that everyone else does, but can you do X, Y, or Z? Like, what kind of value-added services are out there?
Yeah, so typically a 4PL will have fewer value-added services just because they need to standardize across multiple warehouses, right? Versus an individual if you want something really custom, I'm going to give you an example. There's a longtime customer of ours, Sauceda Industries in Austin, who they used to work with Tecovas boots, and they would inspect the boots that came back to make sure they weren't worn. And there's this whole complex process, right? You're not going to go to a 4PL and get them to do that, right? But you can go to a business owner, someone who's running, it's a small business. It's not a really small business, right? But it's still a owner-operated small business, 3PL, and they'll do that stuff for you, right? 4PL is not set up to deal with that sort of complexity. The value prop on a 4PL is around the number of facilities and managing where the stock goes. So the idea here is unless you're a top 100 retailer, can't afford to have 5, 6, 7 warehouses in the US, right? You're probably gonna have one. By working with a 4PL, you now have access to this large network of warehouses without having to build all these different relationships. So the 4PL builds the relationship, so you don't have to. What we're trying to do is we do the same thing. We actually take the product we distributed for you. So what happens is merchant sends the product to our warehouse in Nevada, and we actually move it for them to Jacksonville and all those other places. But that's the value of the 4PL. You get access to a bunch of warehouses, but for you, it feels like one. You have one point of contact versus in the old days, you'd have had to contact one here, one here, one there, one there. And that's too many relationships to manage.
Makes sense.
Is there like any I don't know. This is kind of like a one-off question that popped in my head, and I feel like we get this a lot. Is like packing slips and branding. Like everything to make the box look good, or like even these like custom boxes that people buy to have like their logos actually on the box itself. I'm assuming we don't really see that a lot in like the 4PL side of things, but is that something like 3PLs do as well? Is that another value add?
Yeah, so like custom invoices that you'll be able to get from any good, even 4PL. In terms of fully custom boxes, so it depends on which one. I mean, we do it. Some other, so like Deliver won't, but Deliver's like a low cost leader, so they wouldn't do that. But some other ones, like ourselves, like Shipmonk, who have multiple facilities, will do that. So you can definitely get it. If you're doing 50 orders a month, no one's gonna do that all that work for you. But if you've got decent volume, it's not a problem.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I feel like a lot of the times too, just with anything, 3PL related, software related, you would love to get someone that's got good customer support as well, right? I mean, like anything can break or go wrong, or shipments get sent to the wrong place, things, whatever, all this stuff. There's always something that can happen. And I feel like deciding on a 3PL or 4PL, which in-house, whatever you're going with, they've got good customer service. They're able to get back to you on things. Like we're able to have a good business to business relationship. So I feel like that would be another one as well.
Yeah, definitely. And that's definitely something that the smaller 3PLs are better at, having the ability. To give you an example, let's say the standard SLA is 3 business days to receive a container, right? And you're a summer brand and your product got late, right? So you've got all these back orders, and now it just showed up on July 15th. And you don't want it to wait 2 business days. You're like, I want to cut the line and get all mine received in today. A small 3PL or a more entrepreneurial 3PL will look at that, and the owner will say, yeah, that makes sense. I'm going to push this guy to the front of the line once because it's going to help him out a lot, and it makes sense, right? Versus a larger 4PL will not, be flexible like that. It's like, nope, first in, first out. Yours showed up today. It'll be received on Friday or Monday. Right. So you can get that better relationship with some of the smaller guys.
Yeah, makes sense. Travis, what are your thoughts on software when it comes to, either, I mean, we've been talking about 3PLs a lot, like anything from like an in-house fulfillment side of things, like making sure you get the right, I mean, we see this all the time, right? And inventory management. Are you an inventory management system? Are you a warehouse management system? Like, can you do barcode scanning? Can you not? Can you do this? Can you do that? I mean, like, what are your thoughts on like the importance of software that we can talk about for our retailers that want to, go in-house or go 3PL?
Yeah, like Aaron mentioned earlier, I mean, it's a big piece of it. It's a big part of the equation. You need to make sure that you can trust it, right? So. Yeah, I mean, it's nowadays you really need that. It's a competitive advantage, I think. I don't think it always was, but it definitely is now. Like Aaron mentioned earlier, if you're doing high volume and you have something that can automatically pick the right box for you and reduce your order fees, I mean, that's gonna be a competitive advantage for you if you can drive margin like that. So, we're bullish on it, obviously, with the rise of third-party logistics and distributed fulfillment. Distributed order management in general. So I think softwares can continue to be more of a competitive advantage and helping you squeeze out margin, reduce shipping times, reduce your carbon footprint potentially in a lot of cases, right? If you can ship to the closest warehouse and optimize packaging and things like that. So obviously we're pretty bullish on it being important.
Yeah. Cool. Any closing thoughts, guys? We're kind of wrapping up here a little bit. Travis, you got any more questions?
Yeah, I mean, I guess, for all the listeners now or in the future, I definitely want to dive back into the business. I'm just here just wanting to learn more about ShipHero. So we might be done on some of the 3PL versus 4PL stuff. But before I do that, Aaron, is there anything else we didn't talk about you think might be helpful that we didn't touch on?
No, I think you covered it. I double click on the carbon and environmental benefits. So a lot of companies. So I like to use Zappos as an example, where Zappos started, and you would order at 10 o'clock at night, and they would throw it on a plane from Las Vegas, and it would get to me in New York the next morning. And while that was a great experience, and I probably didn't think twice about it at the time, in retrospect, that's probably not. We have a limited amount of carbon we can emit, and that's probably not the best use of it. So what Zappos has done is, they're part of Amazon, so now they're distributed. So it ships from everywhere, and they don't have to do that anymore. But I still see a lot of brands who are using that same approach, where it's like, we're not going to get smart with our logistics. We're just going to throw UPS next and second they air at the problem. Mm-hmm. And I think it's costly. You talk about margin. It kills your margin, but also it's bad for the environment. And it's one of those things that you don't have to. You can just be smarter about where you stage your product, and you can get the same delivery service level without the cost and without the environmental impact. So I think that's the place where software really still has a big part to play. And retailers, because we're in this business, we see it, are embarrassingly behind. They might talk a lot about sustainability and, net zero targets, but then they're throwing, I like to say throwing toilet paper on airplanes, right? Like it doesn't need, my toilet paper doesn't need to be here overnight. Like it can take a couple extra days. And I think brands need to catch up on that.
Well, and you guys are really kind of helping retailers, and even the SMB, right? Like you said earlier, the top 1%, they've got warehouses all over the place. They're already distributed. That's fine. But you guys are helping that mid-market and SMB kind of get there. And the software is part of the equation, but and I've seen this as a common theme among a lot of companies in your space, like package it up with the 3PL side. And that was a question I want to ask and get into and learn a little bit more about. When did ShipHero decide? Was it early? Was it late? Was there a decision point? Like we did software first and then we want to get into 3PL. What was that decision like? Did you guys always know it was going to be a route you were going to take, or just curious to know more about that shift, if it was a shift?
Yeah, no, we never wanted to do our own warehouses. So we always wanted to be software, and we wanted the way the software to work is that product shows up at one warehouse, the 3PL distributes it to all the warehouses, because the idea that what many other 3PLs will tell you is like, I got 5 warehouses, ship your product to all 5 warehouses. And the reality is, if you have one container come from China, how are you going to get that to 5 warehouses, right? And it's not only, now I got to get 5 containers. It's like our Pennsylvania facility needs 50% of the volume versus like our Utah facility needs 10% of the volume. So how are you going to do that? You're going to send like a quarter of a container? Like, it just doesn't work, right? It doesn't work for individuals. Anyone doing less than $500 million a year in revenue can support sending containers the right quantities to all these warehouses. So you have to do it for them. And we want it to be this, we're the software layer, and we speak to a lot of these people, and we tried to pitch several of them on, hey, this is how you should do it. You should take ownership of what we call load balancing and moving the product around the country, because, you're promising, hey, low carbon by having all these warehouses, but no one's using it. Everyone's using 1 or 2. And we couldn't convince anyone. We're like, this is the way it should be. No one else is doing it. We know what everyone's doing. We see they're not doing it. We're just going to do it ourselves. So we started that just like 2 years and a month ago, I think.
Yeah. Well, I figured it was probably the case, right? You wanted to stay focused, but you just had this problem that you guys are the best to fix. It's interesting. I've seen that, and we struggle with it too. Like, what's our focus? What do we get into? So I really wanted to dig in there. Cool. And you guys, I've been seeing, obviously just the industry as a whole, but you guys are really kind of raising the ranks and been climbing, the pandemic. I'd just be curious to know, like, how has the pandemic affected you from a revenue perspective? How'd you guys get through it? Got to end with a pandemic question. Might as well get one of those in. And just, how has it changed business, revenue perspective, but also how'd you guys get through it, owning warehouses and having kind of all those struggles there?
Yeah, so we were actually only did outsourced warehouses. We didn't start our own until, I don't remember the exact month, but I think May of 2020. So right in the heart of the pandemic. So couldn't travel, didn't get out to our first warehouse for like a year. So I physically wasn't there. So I had to do it all remote, had a great team who did the setup. And then we did 2, and then we did 3, right? So we got 3 done during the no travel period of or really hard to travel period of the pandemic. So it was really tough, but we felt we had to. There was concerns about like we mentioned, quality, but also capacity and resiliency, where we had, the risk, we didn't know at the time what the odds were that any given facility was shut down. So we wanted to make sure that we had more facilities so that if, there's a COVID outbreak and we had to shut a facility for 2 weeks, which, that seemed like that didn't really turn out to happen, but we thought that might happen. We need to be prepared where like our customers wouldn't get shut down because we had a bunch of facilities. So we went all in during the early phase of the pandemic, really jumped right in and built out a lot of capacity and it worked out, from a financial perspective, worked out well.
Gotcha. And you guys, seeing record growth right now. Is this the quickest year? I mean, in recent years at least?
Yep. Yeah, it was a good year. I mean, we've grown, like we being bootstrapped, you never grow super fast. But we've done pretty consistent every year. So we've been growing nicely before that, but pandemic definitely supercharged it. So we ended up doing, 50% more growth than we expected. And now I think it's back to normal, but off a much higher base. So
Right. All right.
How's it by you? How'd the numbers play out for you?
The same. I mean, we've been bootstrapped to some extent. We've taken on, $1 million early, as far as early in the Flxpoint era, basically $1 million to get Flxpoint going. It's been funded a lot by our inventory source brand as well, kind of helping it get off the ground. But I mean, it was in that March, April, May, we just saw it explode. And then it just continued to stay steady since then in both brands, really, which has been kind of nice because we've been pivoting with, pushing more marketing and just resources towards Flxpoint and inventory sources kind of been keeping pace. So we think there's just a lot more. I've just seen just from search impressions and things like that, a lot more interest in dropship, a lot more interest in U.S. suppliers, just a lot more interest in just distributed fulfillment, right? If everyone's going to third-party warehouses and have their own, and then they're starting to dropship as well, trying to figure out that puzzle. And that's where the Flxpoint side is really picking up. So it's been good. And I'd say now it's back to steady instead of like crazy rocket, but it's been, staying steady.
So what are you seeing on the U.S. manufacturing side? I hear a lot of talk. I'm not seeing a ton, but you probably know better than me.
I haven't seen a lot from, we were manufacturing somewhere else. Now we're manufacturing in the U.S., but we have seen a lot more interest in, I would like to source my goods from U.S. distributors and suppliers versus trying to do the China sourcing, right? Or, also just adding other brands and other products in general to try to capture this new market. Whether it was I sold T-shirts and hoodies. Now I want to get into athleisure because everyone's staying at home. We saw that too, right? So adding additional product lines was a big push into where inventory source plays. But it's mostly about, I want to be able to drop ship. I want to be able to have a more flexible supply chain here in the States versus, completely shifting to manufacturing.
Yeah, because it'd be cool if it happened, but like, it's just, there's so many pieces that we're missing here in the US in terms of like, making that athleisure stuff, like the factory capacities there versus here, just orders of magnitude.
No, it's more or less just getting more of it here ready to be shipped in 2 days, right? And getting it in here. And then if we can get more of this flexible supply chain on our side, like dealing with a retailer and the suppliers and distributors, keeping it into these warehouses and be able to sell it to a large network, then they can make bigger buys from China and they can keep it here and have it. If the traditional method, if they're looking for that same PO every quarter from Macy's or Nordstrom, and that's their whole business, then it kind of changes things, which stopped very much so when the pandemic hit. So I think with the distribution of products across a lot of different channels and being drop shipped, we're hoping to see that, they're just able to keep more stock in the States.
Yeah. And then when people realize that being able to air that product in when you need it last minute, and also the rates went up like 5x and you couldn't afford to bring stuff in by air, or probably even more than 5x at the height of it, because there were no commercial airlines. Yeah, I think probably people were like, this whole just in time, like order last second, like put me out of business. So
yeah, some crazy stuff. All right, cool. Thanks, guys. I mean, we hit the nail on the head on time wise. This is perfect. Aaron, thanks for joining. Thanks for all your insight. You know, I've personally learned a lot from this conversation. Give us a quick little ShipHero plug. Why would someone use ShipHero?
Yeah, so if you need software for your own warehouse, shiphero.com. And if you want to outsource, we've got pricing right on the website, fulfillment.shiphero.com.
Perfect. Awesome. Thanks for that. Thanks for jumping on today. I appreciate it. Anybody that's listening, tuning in, obviously the podcast is on YouTube. We're on Apple, Stitcher, and Spotify. So thanks for joining in, and make sure to look out on the next episode. Thanks, guys, for joining.
Thanks for having me.
All right.
All right. See you, everybody.